episode of The Warrior Mystic. Several subscribers have asked me to describe how I got into Druidry and to talk about some of my experiences with Druidry. Well, to start with, I grew up on a farm in rural South Carolina in the 1960s and early 1970s. And although my family was Southern Baptist, I spent more time in the woods than I did in any church. There was 400 acres of woods and forests and river to play with when I was a child. And my memories are more about that than they were about the Southern Baptist experience, so to speak. And being raised like that, always being close to nature, it just kind of stuck with me. The Christian thing never did quite take, but when I found about Druidry in about 1977 at the age of 17, then that was something that I could relate to. It was a spirituality that I could grasp because it was closer to nature and more akin to what I was familiar with. So in 1978, 79 I think it was, my family moved to Pensacola, Florida. And at the time I was new to Druidry. The only organization I knew about was the Reformed Druids of North America, and they were away in Minnesota. And here I was in Pensacola, Florida. And back then there was no internet. The only way you could find out about things like this was to go do some research in a library or in the bookstore. So that's what I did. And eventually, while I was at the library at the local university, there was a poster on the wall. I had just started college at the time. And it was talking about the Emerald Coast Grove of Druids. That sounded like, that might be something I'd be interested in. So I contacted them and I joined Emerald Coast Grove in 1979. I became a full-fledged Druid in that grove. And that was a very exciting time for me because we met on the beach. If you're familiar with Pensacola at all, the mainland has Escambia Bay there. And then there's, well, at the time there were a series of cliffs they called the bluffs. And at the base of those cliffs at the time, there was a forest that we met in. And sometimes we'd walk a little further, the forest gave way to the trees gave way to the beach out there. And then we could go meet out on the beach and meet among the sand dunes and gather there. I visited Pensacola recently in 2019, and the bluffs are no longer there. They have been plowed over and planted in order to, supposedly improve the environment. And another problem there is that because of global warming, the beach that we used to hold rituals on no longer exists. The water goes right up to the edge of the forest. So that beach there that we used to explore and hold rituals on no longer exists. So that was kind of a sad thing to notice when I was there recently. But anyway, I became a Druid in about 1979 when I discovered Pensacola's Emerald Coast Grove. And ever since that time I've been on the Druid path because it feels like the path that's right for me. Anytime I talk to anyone who's experienced Druidry in the past, they always say the same thing, that they were searching and that when they found Druidry it was like coming home. So I guess the Warrior Mystic channel is for all of those who feel like they're coming home when they've discovered what Druidry is and what it's about. Now, some of my experiences in Druidry. One of the earliest ones I can remember, a friend of mine was also in Emerald Coast Grove, and we used to write music together. I'm a musician, for those of you who have bought my albums or seen me perform. And at the time I was in a rock band with this particular person who was also the keyboard player. And we were exploring shamanism. Back then there wasn't a whole lot of shamanism in Druidry. That has become more of a recent invention. Well, I wouldn't want to call it an invention because it's my belief that our ancient ancestors practiced shamanism, that Druidry is basically Celtic shamanism. But we were investigating shamanism in whatever way we could, and we would engage in shamanic practices from time to time to see what we could gather, what information we could gather. And one night, about midnight during a full moon, we were sitting there on the beach where our sacred grove was, and we had done one of those rituals. And we began playing the drums. Actually, I wasn't playing the drums, but some of the people that were gathered there were playing the drums. there around the fire. And I was just sitting there staring off into space. Back then there wasn't as much light pollution, and you could actually see the Milky Way going across the bay and the full moon on the other side. So it was a very beautiful starry night, and I was feeling the drums and thinking about the shamanic ritual that we had just engaged in. And suddenly I noticed that I started rocking back and forth. And it was like a heartbeat type of thing. And the experience to me then was that I was feeling the heartbeat of Mother Earth herself. I was rocking back and forth to the resonance frequency of the planet, that I was feeling Mother Earth's heartbeat. That was my first inkling that there was something more to this shamanic journeying than we tend to think there is. I also remember at that time I was a big fan of bands like Pink Floyd, Yes, all those progressive rock bands. And I would set my stereo speakers up at the head of the bed, one on either side of my pillow. And then I would light some incense and a few candles, and then I would go on these journeys using the music to help me. Yes, and Pink Floyd. If you've ever had that experience, just lying still with incense burning in the dark and hearing that music, it takes you places. So that was another shamanic druid influence that I had in my life. But the whole experience of druidry lets me know that there is something larger. There's a bigger thing out there and a bigger part of life that we have kind of forgotten when we trap ourselves in the cities and don't make room for nature. And I'm not just talking about going out for a walk in the woods or enjoying the beach. I'm talking about one-on-one communion with nature, sitting there in stillness and letting nature fill you up, letting nature become who you are, and letting you become what nature is. And by doing that, it fills you up in ways that can't be described. One of the things that modern druidry talks about, and probably ancient druidry as well, is the life force, nuevra nert, depending on what Gaelic language you speak or what Celtic language you speak. You might call it different things, but the concept is the same, and the concept is that all life generates energy. All living things generate energy, and all of that interweaves together, and we're all part of it, and it's a part of all of us. It's like a drop in the ocean. If you take a drop out of the ocean, you can see plainly that it's a drop. But if you put it back in the ocean, can you tell where the drop ends and where the ocean begins? It's all the same thing. So the energy that we're made of and the energy that everything else in life is made of is all the same energy. At some fundamental level, we're all one. We're all part of the same thing. And that to me is the greatest lesson of druidry, that what I do to others, I do to myself. So if I take care of myself, I'm taking care of others. If I take care of others, I'm taking care of myself. If I pollute the environment around me, I'm polluting myself, because I will eat the food that's been polluted and breathe the air that's been polluted. If I make sure that the air is clean and that the water is clean, I'm taking care of myself, because I'm drinking clean water and I'm breathing clean air, because I've been a steward of nature. So ultimately, druidry is about your walk with the world, your walk with nature, how you are in the world, what your footprint is. And that to me is the ultimate experience of druidry. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. And if you have any suggestions for topics, please leave them in the comments below. I'll be glad to get around to them eventually. Thanks.